Today's video was actually recorded yesterday. And I was in a little bit of a weird mood when I recorded that video because, so some of you guys saw the video I uploaded yesterday. And after I uploaded that, I left, I had things to do. And just as I was getting into the car to drive across town to see the first student of mine, I was informed that my great uncle had been taken off life support, and yesterday morning he'd been placed on life support. My great uncle Cecil was a very charismatic guy. He was that uncle that you want to sit and hang out with at all of your family functions. I was actually the first person who he ever told about his service in Vietnam. He didn't talk about that with anyone until he told me the circumstances of his service. He was one of only 2 people in his group to make it back. He showed me the scar he had on the bottom of his foot from stepping down on, if any of you guys know anything about Vietnam, like they would sharpen these bamboo sticks and put different bodily fluids, bodily substances on them so that, people would lose their legs and get sick. And he actually did step on one of those. He showed me the crazy scar, told me crazy stories. So he and I were pretty close, as you would imagine something like that would make you to someone. And he'd been struggling with his health for a long time, so rest in peace, Uncle Cecil. I'd call him Mighty Joe Young, lovingly, of course. I really love that guy. And so, when I was leaving my first of what were supposed to be 3 skate lessons, that was weighing heavily on me. And then I was informed by one student's parent that student had an ear infection, and then that the other student was sick with a stomach flu. So I just decided to go to Lafayette and skate a little bit, and then I had the idea to record the video that you're going to see. Now I want to give a little bit of context about this because I feel like I'm going to have to do some explaining with some of these things, because I'm realizing that a lot of you guys are like complete beginners. And so, for one thing, the foot placement video that you're about to watch, you really have to pay attention because there are subtle differences between the foot positions. I've already watched and edited the video. The light died and I tried to keep going, but it looked kind of funky. But basically, I've already watched over and edited the rest of the video, and I decided that I need to come here and speak a little bit because there's some clarification for some of you guys who are absolute beginners. So to you, since you don't have any context for being able to land a kickflip, being able to do it in different ways, the slight differences in foot position, it's not going to make sense to you, right? Why would it make sense to you? I didn't know that I would have to change my foot completely from a kickflip on flat to a kickflip 50-50 to a kickflip crooked grind to a kickflip downstairs when I was there. So don't worry too much about that. If you're at the beginning stage, worry about kind of what I said about the beginning kickflip and how I shift my front foot a bit to get it to more of a pretty looking kickflip that's going to allow you to kickflip off of a curb, maybe off of your first 2-stair. And then you can worry about the other steps later. I'd also like to shout out Oscar, who, when you watch the video, I'm going to be filming myself in the beginning, and then someone else is going to take the phone after me and shoot the rest. That's Oscar, kid from the neighborhood. He actually came over, and there's actually a pretty big gap in between the first part of the video where I'm talking and when you see me actually go through the tricks, because he asked me if I could show him how to kickflip back grind. And I took about 25 minutes and got him to land his first kickflip back grind. Just showing him the same things that I go through in the video. So when I start saying that it's dark, the reason it got so dark is because I took out that 25 minutes or whatever to help Oscar. Then he landed it, and I feel so badly because later on we went so he could land another one, and he actually landed one when I hit record too late and didn't catch it. But he landed his kickflip back grind. I don't know if he landed another one. I'll have to ask him when I see him. But yeah, like, the tips work. You just have to kind of trust the process. Skateboarding is hard. And then I also go into a little bit about the last video at the end of this one. So if you're interested in hearing that, stick around until the end. And that's probably the last that I'll say about that video. But I used a clickbaity title, and it seems like it worked. It seemed like it got some attention. I'm not planning on leaning into that much into the future. I just wanted to see what it was all about. And also there's just like some people, and it's like a type of mindset that's really annoying. You know, the second of the two mindsets I discussed yesterday, because the first one, like the first type of mindset where you tried something, you haven't really tried it enough to know if something works, but you're frustrated and so you just give up. Like that's something that usually young people exhibit. The second mindset, when I've experienced it and when my jiu-jitsu coach is telling me about it, it's almost always people in their 20s and 30s. It's almost always people in their 20s and 30s. And in my opinion, when you're in your 20s and 30s, as far as that goes, you should know better, right? Like you should have some experience with learning by now, and you should know that it's a process. But I'm not going to get any further into that. Watch the video. Hopefully it's helpful to you. Last thing I want to say is that, and I go into this a little bit later, I show a little bit of a Tre Flip. This is not a kickflip specific thing. I have different ways that I do my heel flips as well. I even have different ways that I do a varial heel flip. If I'm doing a varial heel on flat, if I'm doing it onto a crooked grind, or if I'm doing it off of a gap, I do them differently. I just set my foot up differently. I might hang more of my toes off, hang less of my toes off, bring my front foot closer to the back foot, put my back foot closer to the outer edge of the tail versus the inner edge of the tail. So once you get used to doing this with something like a kickflip or even with an ollie, because I do the same thing with my ollies for different applications, then it'll help you. Once you learn to apply this strategy with one trick, it'll make it easier for you to apply it to others. Thank you for watching and enjoy the video. So today is an interesting day. Just came from teaching one kid, and on the way to teaching another one, I found out that a relative passed away, and so that's a lot. Pretty close relative at some point too. And just after that, I found out that the person I was on the way to teach was sick. So close to Lafayette Park, and decided instead of just going home, I'd come over here and make a little bit of a video. So I was watching a video of Angie Peroni. She skates for Collage, my brand. This is one of our decks right here. This is the Lovers graphic. And she was doing a kickflip. She was kickflipping a 5-stair. Someone else saw the footage too. And we were talking about how far up she puts her foot when she kickflips off a set of stairs. And we were both just talking about, I know exactly who it was. It was Paul Rakowski III, who also rides for Collage. And so we're talking about where we put our feet to kickflip different things off a set of stairs, on flat ground, onto a grind. And so I figured right now that'd be an interesting topic to dive into. So let's start off with where I put my feet as a beginner. So for a beginner, the setup that I always ran with was about here, right? Back foot there, front foot here. And now that looks like a lot of my foot, but I wear a size 12. So if you pay attention, there's quite a bit of my foot hanging off of the board, and it would look a little something like this. Let's see if I can hold on. Right, that's about the kickflip that you do as a beginner. Not very high off of the ground. You're not able to aim or anything like that, but it gets the kickflip done. Now, personally, these days, if I'm playing a game of skate against someone and I haven't warmed up, the kickflip is the hardest trick to do for me in the beginning of the day. So that's usually the type of kickflip that I would do. As I got better at skateboarding, right, I changed my foot position quite a bit. So I put it just behind the bolts. My foot would be at less of an angle, right? For the beginners, kickflip, my foot's at an angle. I changed my foot to about here. And it's gonna look a little bit like this. Let's see if I can do it. Not too hard there. So with the second kickflip there, you start to get a little more height. You start to get a little bit more control. And you can kind of use that second kickflip to get off of a curb, to get off of smaller sets of stairs and things like that. And also, another thing that's important for your first kickflips into grinds. So I'm going to try to figure out how I can show you guys how I kickflip into grinds. So that's like the first version of the kickflip that I showed you earlier, or the second version, right? Our first is for the beginners. Foot's back here, foot's at an angle. Our second, we straighten our foot up a bit. We're still not using much of it. And it's just here, just beneath the bolts, right? That's what I'm using to get onto that 50-50. Only when I kickflip, I'm following through with the front foot, so past the nose, and I'm aiming backside where I'm going, right? And that's how I have the control to get onto that 50-50. Now, let's talk a little bit about kickflipping for height. So when I kickflip for height, it's very different. So for one thing, up until now, my back foot's been about here, right? And my front foot's, I've had less of my front foot on the board, but now we're gonna almost reverse. I'm gonna use more of my front foot. It's gonna be further up. My back foot, only the toes are gonna connect, right? And now I'm gonna make sure that I squat and immediately come up. So I'm down, right? And it's hard to do it that way in place, but our main goal is power and explosion for this one. So I'm using more of the front foot so that I have resistance, because if I put my foot here and do the same thing, it's gonna double flip, right? But I don't wanna do a double flip. I just want a high kick flip. I want power. So I use more of my foot so there's more resistance, and I follow through a little more. And that's what gives me that height and power. And also the clean connection with the back foot, where I'm stamping into the ground, kind of like you would for these no complies, right? Now, there's several other ways that I could apply this as well. For instance, if I want to kickflip into something frontside, like a frontside nose slide, something like that, I'm going to change foot positions again. And this is the only way that I would use Angie's position that I talked about earlier, right? So my front foot's going to be over these two bolts. I'm going to try to do it on this little ledge, but to be honest, I'm not that precise when it comes to something this small. So we'll see if I can make it work, but it's much more difficult for me on something like this. And the actual ledge, go ahead, point over there. It's occupied right now. So this is what I got to work with. But yeah, my foot's up, my front foot's all the way up here. I'm gonna use less of my front foot, and my back foot's gonna be across just like this. And so I'm using more of my foot, less of my foot, I'm sorry. I'm using less of my foot, and I'm spreading my legs farther apart so that I have a little more control over the rotation, right? And if I were to place my foot farther back, it's gonna make me flip a little bit higher, and I'm gonna have less control, so that wouldn't really work for me. Now, there's another way that I can place my foot, right? And this is just my general purpose kickflip, like if I want to kickflip down the stairs. And for this, it's gonna be kind of a mixture of the kickflip that I did for height and the kickflip that I did for control, right? Where I'm kickflipping into that 50-50. So my back foot, it's kind of halfway across the tail. My front foot is about the same amount across the board, but it's up here a little bit further. It's not all the way at the tip of the board. And for this one, I'm gonna focus more on coming kind of off the side so that it happens quickly, but not too quickly. So I'm gonna do one off of this, and then we'll go to the stairs and I'll show it off of that. I'm not aiming for height. I'm not aiming for a super fast flip either. I just want a concise, clean kickflip. What I mean by concise is that, like, when you speak concisely, every word that you say matters. It's directing someone towards the point of your sentence or your paragraph. And it's the same for this. My foot positioning, everything, it's just helping me do that kickflip quickly, but nothing flamboyant. So we're gonna go to the 5-stair, and I'm gonna do one down that.
unfortunately, I don't have the gas, and it's a little too dark for me to be kickflipping up it today. I guess you can be over here for that. It'll work a little better. I'm basically doing the same thing that I did off of the small ledge for that. The only difference is I want to make sure that my tail makes contact with the ground quickly, because I'm a little bit higher up, so I have less margin for error. Now, this is not the biggest set of stairs, it's a 5-stair, and I did it down the shorter part, so I'm not worried about the distance. I'm not worried about kickflipping high. I just want this simple, and for lack of a better word, concise kickflip, right? I'm here, boom, that's all I need to do. And the last one we'll talk about is what I use if I'm gonna do like a kickflip crooked grind, right? So since it's similar to what I do for the kickflip backside 50-50, tricks like that, however, I gotta be more precise. So I'm gonna use the angled foot that I used for the first kickflip, and my back foot's gonna be in here. This way I'm leaning towards the ledge, but I also do this type of kickflip if I'm doing, let's say, a kickflip back lip, a kickflip backside tail slide. They all work. So here we go. I probably won't land this first one, but we'll see. I guess I did land it. It was weird. I never land these tricks on anything this small, because with my height, I usually struggle for it, but I tried as hard as I could that time. That was actually harder than it would have been on the higher ledge, but I'm not sure if that translated, but I had my feet where I showed you. So this one's open, this foot's back here, and I'm following through again with my shoulder to the ledge, and I'm trying to get right over the ledge with this shoulder, right? So I'm parallel and I'm following through. See, I kickflipped on top of it. That's what I thought was gonna happen with the first one, and I was gonna eat it, because this is a little too small for me, but almost died again. Here we go, one more. Yeah, this is not the height for me. It's a little easier while I'm rolling. But I think you get the message. So I actually thought of one more, and we'll go over to this flat bar for this, and I might die, but for kickflip back tails and stuff like that, bring my foot a little bit closer, and back foot's gonna be out here. And for this, I'm gonna focus on how I rotate my shoulders before I pop, right? Because that's gonna help me generate enough force to get up there and the spin, but I can't use the same foot position I used earlier for the kickflip front nose, because I've gotta have my tail up there, which getting your nose up to something and your tail up to something, they're completely different. Now, I'm probably not gonna land this one, but let's try. I'm actually terrified, but that's kind of, I can barely see right now, it's too dark and I'm old, but that's kind of, I'll try one more. Okay, so I'm using that foot position to allow me to be precise getting into that rail. And just like with the kickflip crook, I'm pointing myself into place, but I'm using my shoulder. So the reason that I chose this topic was because I saw Angie's kickflip down the 5-stair, obviously, but also because you don't just apply this with a kickflip. For instance, I'll show you a couple of the different things I'll use for a Tre flip. So garden variety, my foot's all the way out here, right? That, it doesn't matter how high I do it or anything like that. When I want to do it higher, I bring my foot further back, I use a little bit more of my front foot to give it stability, and I'm gonna fling it a little more. When I wanna do, let's say, Tre Flip into a nose slide, I would have my back foot here so that I can fling it out and catch it like that. So this is gonna apply to every single one of the tricks that you do on a skateboard. I chose kickflip because obviously it's the easiest for me to show you guys and to go through different versions of the trick. If I tried to do it with Tre Flip, I'd be here all day and it'd be dark before I could even finish. But that's basically what I have for this. This is just a kind of guide to how foot position relates to your application of certain tricks. There's multiple different ways, and in the last video that I uploaded today, or yesterday it'll be by the time I upload this, so I'm gonna wait a day. I know that video was about mindsets that stop you from learning, why you suck at skateboarding. It was a little bit clickbaity of a title, but I did touch on how you can do different kickflips and you can apply them to different obstacles, different situations for different heights. And so this was a poignant video to make at the time, and you can take this and apply it to all of your tricks. It's just gonna take trial and error. Leave down in the comments if you want me to explain this for other tricks. Like, I know I did the levels video, but the levels is more about your level of control with certain tricks, and this is about specific applications and how the foot position affects how you use certain tricks. I have to say that this foot position, the one that I used for the kickflip back tail, I actually learned that from watching Nigel Houston. Before that, I could do kickflip back tails, kickflip back lips, kickflip back nose blunts, tricks like that. But I saw that in one of Nigel's videos, and I'm talking old school Nigel with the dreadlocks, because I saw him doing kickflip back smiths and kickflip back tails in one of his videos, and I noticed his foot position. And as soon as I applied that to my own skating, it helped me be much more consistent. Like kickflip back tailing up on that flat bar second try like that, I'd have never been able to do that if I hadn't gleaned this little trick from watching Nigel skating. So my advice to you is, if you admire someone skating, watch them, watch what they do with their bodies, watch what they do with their feet, watch how their foot positioning changes. Like if they're kickflipping down a set of stairs, how's their foot, versus if they're kickflipping into a manual, versus if they're kickflipping into a backsmith or a feeble grind or anything like that. I can almost guarantee you that it's gonna be different. And thankfully we live in an era today where it's easy to watch and find that out. Like when I was learning how to skate, everything was shot on high 8 at first, and then VX, and then we the last little bit of me learning how to skate, really, it was like the Panasonic DVX 100A and DVX 100B. So everything was still relatively grainy, and our TV sets weren't good either. So we just kind of had to mess around and find out, you know what I mean? Now you guys can freeze frame, you guys can slow-mo, you can screen capture on your phone and scrub with your finger. You have endless resources that you can tap into when you want to learn a trick, and you have people like me sharing how I do these tricks, why I do these tricks. So thank you for watching, like and subscribe. Some of you guys got triggered by the last video. Some guys like, there's no teaching about learning here. Look, I'm sorry that that's where your brain went, but honestly, I outlined why you shouldn't argue with someone who's teaching you something. How one mindset is that is trying something not enough and then thinking that a method doesn't work. Another mindset is just being combative with someone who's trying to teach you. Those are two different mindsets. I think that I was articulate enough for the majority of you guys to understand it. For the people who didn't, I'm sorry that that's, but I think that that's more of a reflection of how you're thinking, because I did explain how good of a skateboarder I am, which is necessary. It's necessary for me to be credible, for me to be teaching you something, right? Otherwise, there's no reason for you to listen to me versus the kid in your neighborhood at your skate park, right? But there's a reason why I need to communicate with you guys, because a lot of you guys didn't see any of my career. Thank you for watching. Peace.